Alpha Queen touched the ancient gate. Then the lunar wolf dog revealed its true power. I watched my mother's stone eyes crack down the middle before the Eastern witch's staff shattered her completely, and I knew then that queens don't always die with crowns on their heads. Sometimes they die on their knees, turned to rubble like common statues in a forgotten garden. But before I tell you how I lost everything and found something far more dangerous in the ruins, I need to ask you something. If you believe that queens can rise from ashes, that love can break ancient curses, and that a woman with nothing left to lose is the most powerful force in any kingdom, then subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because this story, my story, is one you'll want to follow until the very end. Trust me, what comes next will change everything you think you know about power, destiny, and the price of vengeance. Now, let me take you back to the night everything shattered. The sound still echoes in my nightmares, that specific crack, like lake ice breaking under weight that should never have been there in the first place. Sharp and final. My mother's face, frozen mid-scream in gray stone, split vertically as if God himself had decided she was meant to be two people instead of one. Then came the second blow from Malakar's obsidian staff, and Queen Seraphine's starfrost became dust. Just dust. Gray powder settling on the throne room floor like dirty snow. I couldn't scream. My tongue was trapped between my teeth so hard I tasted copper, hot and metallic, flooding my mouth as I bit down to keep from making a sound that would draw the witch's attention to where I hid behind the lunar tapestry. My father had shoved me there seconds before the petrification spell hit him mid-lunge, his sword still raised to strike, his face caught forever in an expression of futile rage. He lasted 3 seconds longer than my mother, before Malakar turned to him with that terrible smile and brought her staff down again. More dust, more gray powder, more nothing where my parents had been. The smell hit me then, sulfur and rotting lilies, the signature stench of blood magic mixed with something worse, something that made my Luna Blanca powers recoil instinctively even in my terror. Dark magic always smells like death pretending to be flowers. My mother taught me that when I was 6, making me memorize the scent profiles of different magical signatures. "Someday your nose might save your life, Morwenna," she'd said, holding a vial of captured dark essence under my small nose until I gagged. "Remember this. Always." I remembered. God help me, I remembered everything in that moment. Winter 1391 in northern France was brutal enough without adding magical warfare to the mix. The 100 Years' War had already bled our territories white. With English forces controlling lands so close to our borders, we could see their watchfires from the castle towers on clear nights. Plague had swept through 3 villages in our duchy just last month, leaving mass graves and empty houses and the kind of silence that makes you understand why people believe in ghosts. My father had ordered the roads closed, the borders sealed, trying desperately to protect what remained of our people from disease and invasion both. He never expected the real threat would come from the east during a new moon, when Luna Blanca powers ran weakest. Malakar the Bloodstone. Even her name tasted like poison. She'd appeared at our gates at sunset claiming to be an emissary from the eastern kingdoms, bearing diplomatic scrolls and honeyed words about alliances. My mother had been suspicious. I saw it in the way her fingers kept touching the lunar staff at her side, that ancient artifact of pure moonlight, crystallized into silver wood, that had been passed down through 15 generations of Luna Blanca queens. But my father, always the optimist, always believing the best of people, had welcomed her into our hall. By midnight, she'd dropped her disguise and revealed herself. By the first hour past midnight, my parents were dust on the floor, and I was running through secret passages I'd played in as a child, passages I never imagined I'd use to flee my own home. Orion Frostfang found me 3 corridors deep, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. My lunar wolf dog, massive as a small horse with fur like freshly fallen snow and eyes that glowed with actual moonlight, pressed his huge head against my chest and whined low in his throat. His breath was hot against my frozen hands. I'd lost my gloves somewhere between the throne room and this darkness, and the winter cold seeping through the stone walls was vicious enough to numb my fingers in minutes. "We have to go," I whispered to him, my voice cracking. "She'll find us. She'll turn us to stone and break us too." Orion growled, a sound that rumbled through his chest into mine, and I understood what he meant even without words. Not if we run fast enough. Not if we run now. I was 28 years old. 28 and still unmarried, still unmatched, still trained as a Luna Blanca, but never truly tested in actual combat. My mother had been grooming me for power since birth, teaching me to channel moonlight through my palms, to create shields of solidified lunar essence, to read the phases and pull strength from each one. But she died before finishing my education, before teaching me the really important things like how to fight a blood witch during a new moon when your powers were at their weakest, or how to survive losing everything you love in the space between one heartbeat and the next. A ruler who lives can return, my father had told me once, years ago, when I was teenager furious about some perceived injustice. A dead ruler is just a memory, and memories don't free kingdoms, daughter. Only living queens do that. I hadn't understood then. I understood now. Sir Brennan was waiting at the 4th junction, his armor dented and bloodied, his sword dripping with something that wasn't quite blood. Some construct Malachar had summoned that bled black oil instead of red. He was 52, had served my father since before I was born, and I could see in his eyes that he was already dead. The wound in his side was too wide, too dark. He was standing through sheer stubbornness. "Your Majesty," he gasped, and the title broke something in me because my mother had been Your Majesty, and now she was dust. "The Eastern Passage. Take it to the river gate. Horse waiting. Go north. Find—" He coughed, and black blood flecked his lips. Not a good sign. "Find the blood witch of the northern woods. Only blood magic can break blood curses. Only blood can—" He didn't finish. His knees gave out, and Orion caught him, gentle, despite his size, lowering the old knight to the cold stone. Sir Brennan's hand found mine, squeezed once with surprising strength, and then went slack. I didn't have time to cry for him. I could hear Malachar's voice echoing through the passages, calling my name like we were playing hide-and-seek. "Little Luna Blanca," she sang, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Come out. I promise I'll make your transformation quick. Stone doesn't hurt if you don't resist." Orion growled again, more urgently. We ran. The Eastern Passage was narrow and black, and I'd always hated it as a child, convinced it was full of spiders and rats and worse things. Now it was salvation. Orion led the way, his glowing eyes the only light, and I followed with one hand on his massive shoulder, and the other clutching my torn silk skirts. I'd been wearing formal court dress when Malachar struck, midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, a gown meant for receiving diplomats, not fleeing through servant corridors. The fabric caught on rough stone and tore with sounds like small screams. The river gate was unguarded. Either Malachar had killed everyone, or they'd fled. I didn't blame them if they ran. I was running too. A horse waited as Sir Brennan had promised, a sturdy gelding, already saddled, reins tied to a post. Orion boosted me up with his head, and I grabbed the saddle horn with numb fingers, hauling myself onto the horse's back with none of the grace my riding master had drilled into me for years. Grace didn't matter when you were fleeing for your life. Behind us, I heard the sound of the castle doors exploding inward, heard Malachar's voice, no longer sweet, calling out in the language of dark magic, heard her words echo across the winter night. "The weak Luna Blanca line ends tonight. The throne of the north is mine." The horse ran. Orion ran alongside, impossibly fast for something his size, and I clung to the saddle and tried not to think about the lunar staff still in the throne room, about my parents now dust, about my kingdom falling to a witch who ruled through fear and blood. I didn't think. I just survived. That was 20 days ago. 20 days of hiding in abandoned farms and hollow trees. 20 days of stealing bread from village stores and melting snow in my mouth for water. 20 days of transforming from Queen Morwenna Starfrost, Luna Blanca of the North, into a filthy creature in stolen peasant clothes who looked like any other refugee fleeing war and plague. I'd been searching for the Blood Witch. Sir Brennan's last words had become my mission, my purpose, the only thing keeping me moving forward. Find the Blood Witch of the Northern Woods. Only blood magic can break blood curses. If I could find her, if I could convince her to help me, maybe I could reverse what Malachar had done. Maybe I could bring my parents back. Maybe I could reclaim my throne. Maybe was a dangerous word. It tasted like hope and desperation mixed together. On the 20th day, I was crouched outside an abandoned farmhouse, trying to decide if the well water was safe to drink or if plague had contaminated it. Orion sat beside me, patient as always, his white fur now gray with road dust, but his eyes still luminous. He'd been my only companion, my only friend, the only thing between me and complete despair. That's when I heard the hoofbeats. I grabbed Orion's ruff, ready to hide, but he stayed calm. His ears swiveled forward, curious rather than alarmed. A moment later, a rider appeared on the road, a young man in the blue and silver colors of the Starfrost house, riding hard, a messenger, one of ours. He saw me, and I watched his face change, watched recognition strike him like lightning. He reined in so hard his horse reared, and then he was off the saddle and kneeling in the mud before I could tell him not to. "Your Majesty," he gasped. And God, that title still hurt. "I've been searching for days. Thank the moon goddess. I have news. He stopped, and something in his face told me I didn't want to hear what came next. "Tell me," I said, and my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. He swallowed hard. Young, maybe 20, tears on his cheeks. "The witch, Your Majesty, Malachar, she's done something terrible. The statues of your parents, the ones in the throne room." He couldn't finish. "Tell me," I repeated, harder this time. "She destroyed them, my lady. Brought her staff down on both and shattered them completely. Ground the stones to dust and scattered it in the wind. Your father, your mother. His voice broke. There's nothing left to save, nothing left to restore. She made sure of that. And then she sat on your throne and declared herself Queen of the North. I heard the words, understood them, felt them land like physical blows. Nothing left to save. My parents were dust. Not stone that might be restored with the right magic. Not frozen that might be thawed. Just dust. Gone. Scattered. As if they'd never been. I should have cried. Should have screamed. Should have fallen to my knees in the mud and torn my clothes and wailed like women in stories do when they lose everything. Instead, I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Something harder than stone. Sharper than steel. The messenger was still kneeling. Still crying. Orion was watching me with those luminous eyes, waiting to see what I would do. What I did was stand up, wipe the mud off my stolen peasant skirts. Look north toward the dark line of the forest that marked the beginning of the northern woods. Get up, I told the messenger. Go back to whatever's left of our people. Tell them their queen still lives. Tell them I'm not done. Tell them... I stopped, tasting the words before I said them. Tell them nothing. Don't tell them anything. Let Malachar think she's won. Let her think I'm broken. Let her settle into my throne and feel safe. Your Majesty? The messenger looked confused. I didn't explain. Couldn't explain that grief had just burned away everything except the rage underneath. And rage could be sharpened into something far more useful than tears. Go, I repeated. And if she asks about me, tell her you never found me. Tell her I'm probably dead in a ditch somewhere. He hesitated, then nodded and mounted his horse. I watched him ride away, back toward the castle that was no longer mine, back toward the witch who thought she'd destroyed everything I loved. She had destroyed it, but she'd made one mistake. She'd left me alive. I turned toward the forest, toward the northern woods where legend said a blood witch lived, ancient and terrible and powerful enough to break curses that shouldn't be breakable. I would find her. I would learn what I needed to learn, and then I would go back and teach Malachar the Bloodstone what happens when you take everything from a Luna Blanca and leave her with nothing but rage to keep her warm. Orion whined softly beside me, questioning. North, I told him. We go north, and we don't stop until we find answers or death, whichever comes first. He pressed his head against my leg once, warm and solid and real. Then we walked into the forest together, leaving behind the messenger's news, the abandoned farm, and the last shreds of the girl I'd been before I watched my mother's stone eyes crack in half. Queens don't always die with crowns on their heads. Sometimes they die and come back as something else entirely, something much more dangerous. The messenger's words should have broken me, but I was already broken. What they did instead was burn away everything except the rage, and rage, I was learning, could be sharpened into something far more useful than grief. The northern woods swallowed me whole on the 21st day of my search. Not the kind of swallowing that comes with violence or noise, but the quiet kind that happens when you walk between ancient trees and realize the world behind you has simply ceased to exist. One moment I could still see the road through the skeletal winter branches. The next, there was only forest, endless, primordial, untouched by the war that had ravaged everything else, or the plague that had emptied villages like someone had swept them clean with a giant's hand. The locals feared these woods. I'd heard the stories growing up, whispered by servants who crossed themselves when they spoke of the northern woods. Cursed, they said, haunted. Travelers who entered were never seen again, though sometimes on still nights you could hear them calling from between the trees, begging to be let out of whatever trap had caught them. I didn't care about curses anymore. I'd already lived through the worst curse imaginable, watching my parents turn to stone and shatter into dust. What could these woods possibly do to me that was worse than that? Snow fell as I walked, but not the way snow usually falls. This snow moved in patterns, spiraling down in deliberate shapes that almost looked like symbols if you stared at them long enough. I tried not to stare. Orion walked beside me, massive paws leaving prints in the fresh powder that looked more like a wolf's than a dog's, and I kept one hand buried in his thick ruff for warmth and comfort both. We'd been surviving on stolen bread and melted snow. 3 days ago, I'd found a farm cellar with preserved apples and taken 6, eating them so fast I made myself sick. 2 days ago, I'd stolen a wool cloak from a clothesline, leaving my torn silk shawl in its place, like some kind of deranged fairy trade. Yesterday, I'd slept in a hollow oak tree, curled against Orion's warm bulk, dreaming of my mother's stone eyes cracking down the center. I was becoming something feral, something wild. Maybe that's what the forest wanted. On the morning of the 21st day, I woke with frost in my hair, and Orion staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. His luminous eyes were fixed on my face, with an intensity that made my breath catch. He looked like he was trying to tell me something, the way he used to when I was a child, and he'd found something interesting in the castle gardens. A bird's nest, a snake den, once a wounded fox kit we'd nursed back to health. "What is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. I hadn't spoken in 3 days. There was no one to speak to except Orion, and he understood me without words. He stood, shook snow from his fur, and walked north. Not the direction I'd planned to go. I'd been angling northwest, toward the deepest part of the woods where legends placed the Blood Witch's dwelling. But Orion was insistent, looking back at me with those glowing eyes. Waiting, I followed. What else was I going to do? The forest changed as we walked. The trees grew older, thicker, their bark covered in moss so silver it looked like moonlight had solidified and clung to the wood. The snow stopped following those strange patterns and started falling normally, which somehow felt more wrong than the spirals had. The air grew colder, but not with winter's cold, with something else. Something that made my Luna Blanca powers, dormant since the new moon when Malachar had attacked, stir in my chest like a sleeping beast waking. Orion refused to follow any path I tried to choose. Every time I turned toward what looked like a clear route, he'd plant himself in front of me and growl, not threatening, but warning, telling me no, that way is wrong, trust me. So I let him lead, this wolf dog who'd been my companion since I was 14, since my mother had placed his puppy form in my arms, and said, "He'll protect you when I cannot." She'd known. Somehow, my mother had known. We walked for hours. The forest should have thinned eventually, should have opened onto something. Another road, a village, cleared farmland. Instead, it grew denser, older, more primordial. I saw trees that must have been standing when the first Luna Blancas walked the earth. Trunks so wide 10 men holding hands couldn't have circled them. Their branches twisted overhead like a cathedral ceiling, and somewhere high above, I heard birds calling in voices that didn't sound quite right. Then Orion stopped. We'd reached a clearing I swear hadn't been there a moment before. 1 second we were surrounded by dense forest. The next we were standing at the edge of a perfect circle of open ground, maybe 50 feet across, ringed by those massive ancient trees like sentinels. In the center stood ruins. Not much, just fragments of what must have once been a temple. Broken columns of white stone that gleamed even in the filtered winter light. Pieces of a collapsed roof scattered like a giant's discarded toys. And in the very center, still standing, still whole, still impossibly intact, a gate. It was made of silver metal, not steel, not iron, but actual silver that should have tarnished centuries ago, but instead gleamed like it had been polished yesterday. The gate was tall, easily 10 feet high, 6 feet wide, standing free without walls attached to either side. Just a doorframe made of silver, covered in symbols I recognized with a shock that went through me like lightning. Old Tongue, the language of the first Luna Blancas. I'd spent years learning to read Old Tongue from ancient manuscripts in our library, my mother drilling the symbols into my memory until I could read them as easily as common French. These symbols were different, older, more complex, but I could still make out words. Gateway, sanctuary, trial, chosen. "What is this place?" I whispered. Orion didn't answer, just walked forward into the clearing. I followed, and the moment my foot crossed from forest into cleared ground, the air changed, became thicker, harder to breathe, like I was walking underwater. My Luna Blanca powers surged in my chest, responding to something in this place, recognizing it the way you recognize the scent of home after a long absence. The gate had no lock, no hinges, no obvious way to open. It was just a frame of silver metal standing in the ruins of an ancient temple, covered in symbols that whispered of old magic and older promises. I reached out and touched it. The metal was warm, impossibly warm for silver that had been standing in winter woods. The moment my palm made contact, the gate hummed, a low vibration that I felt in my bones, in my teeth, in the very center of my chest, where my Luna Blanca powers lived. The symbols began to glow, faint at first, then brighter, silver light leaking from the carved grooves like the metal was bleeding moonlight. "Moon goddess," I breathed, snatching my hand back. But the gate didn't stop. The humming grew louder, and the symbols pulsed in rhythm like a heartbeat. Orion moved beside me and placed one massive paw against the gate next to where my hand had been. His eyes blazed with light so bright I had to squint, and he let out a sound that was half howl, half something else, something that sounded almost like words in a language I should have been able to understand, but couldn't quite grasp. The gate responded. Silver light exploded from every symbol simultaneously, flooding the clearing with radiance so intense I threw up my arm to shield my eyes. The humming became a roar, became a song, thousands of voices singing in harmony, women's voices, Luna Blanca voices reaching across centuries to welcome me home. When I lowered my arm and forced my eyes open, the gate was no longer empty. Instead of seeing through to the other side of the clearing, I was looking at a vertical pool of liquid light, silver, luminous, moving like water, but shimmering like starlight. It filled the entire frame of the gate, and looking at it made my eyes water and my Luna Blanca powers scream with recognition. This was it, the way forward. Whatever I'd been searching for without knowing I was searching for it. This was it. "Orion," I said, my voice shaking. "What do we do?" He looked at me with those glowing eyes, and I understood. We go through. We've always been meant to go through. I should have been afraid, should have hesitated, questioned, demanded answers from a universe that had given me nothing but pain for the last 3 weeks. But standing there in that ruined temple with my hand still tingling from touching that impossible gate, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night Malachar shattered my parents. Hope. Desperate, fragile, probably foolish hope, but hope nonetheless. I had nothing left to lose. My parents were dust scattered on the wind. My throne was occupied by a blood witch who wanted me dead. My kingdom thought I'd fled, or died. I was a queen with no crown, no castle, no court, wearing stolen peasant clothes and surviving on bread I'd stolen from people who had even less than I did. If the blood witch existed on the other side of this gate, I would find her and make her teach me what I needed to know. If it was a trap, if this was some elaborate way for the universe to finish destroying me, well, at least I'd die trying to fight back instead of freezing to death in these cursed woods. My hands weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from that first spark of hope, fragile as new flame. I looked at Orion. Together? He huffed agreement and moved to stand beside me, his shoulder pressed against my leg. I took a breath, stepped forward, reached out and put both hands flat against that vertical pool of liquid moonlight. It was cold, but not painful, like plunging your hands into a mountain stream in spring. The light parted around my fingers, and I felt it pull me, gentle but insistent, the way the tide pulls at your legs when you stand in shallow surf. "Here we go," I whispered. Then I walked forward and let the light swallow me whole. Crossing through felt like drowning in starlight. Cold rushed over my skin, through my skin, into my very bones. I couldn't breathe but didn't need to breathe. Couldn't see but could see everything. Silver light, and ancient magic, and something vast and old and powerful that looked at me with approval. The Luna Blanca power in my chest exploded outward, meeting the light, merging with it, becoming something more than I'd ever been able to achieve in the mortal world. For one infinite moment, I was everywhere, and nowhere, everyone, and no one. I was every Luna Blanca who'd ever lived, every queen who'd walked through this gate, every woman who'd touched silver metal and stepped into light and emerged transformed. Then the light released me, and I stumbled forward onto solid ground, gasping like I'd been held underwater for too long. I fell to my hands and knees on grass that felt too soft, too perfect. Orion landed beside me with more grace, shaking himself as if he'd just come in from the rain. I knelt there, breathing hard, waiting for my vision to clear, waiting for the world to stop spinning. When I finally looked up, I forgot how to breathe all over again. This wasn't France, wasn't winter, wasn't any place that should exist in the world I knew. The sky above me held 3 moons, one full, one half, one crescent, hanging in a twilight that looked eternal, like the sun was perpetually just below the horizon. The light was soft, silver blue, the color of dawn that never quite becomes day. Stars were visible even though it wasn't truly night, scattered across the sky in constellations I didn't recognize. The landscape was impossible. I was standing on an island. I could see the edges maybe 100 yards in every direction, where the grass simply ended and floating waterfalls cascaded into nothing. Other islands floated nearby, connected by bridges made of solidified light that looked like someone had captured moonbeams and convinced them to hold weight. In the distance, I could see forests of trees with silver bark and leaves that chimed like tiny bells in a wind I couldn't feel, mountains that floated without bases, rivers that flowed upward, and standing 20 feet in front of me, arms crossed, expression unreadable, a man. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build, barely concealed by the fitted leather and velvet of his clothing. His hair was dark, almost black, falling past his shoulders in a way that marked him as nobility from an era long past. His eyes were the color of amber, deep gold brown that caught the eternal twilight and reflected it back with inhuman clarity. His clothes were from another time. Not modern, not even medieval in the way I understood medieval. Older. The leather was tooled with patterns I recognized as old tongue symbols. The velvet was dyed a deep midnight blue that shouldn't have been possible before modern dyes. And his boots were the kind you saw in illuminated manuscripts from 5 centuries ago. He looked at me with those amber eyes, and his voice when he spoke was deep, measured, with an accent I couldn't place, something between French and Latin with notes of languages even older. "Morwenna Starfrost," he said, and hearing my name in his mouth made something in my chest clench. "Luna Blanca of the North, daughter of dust, last of your line. I've been waiting for you." I struggled to my feet, Orion moving protectively between us. My voice came out hoarse, demanding, "Who are you? Where am I? What is this place?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it, only a kind of sad knowledge, like he was looking at something precious that he knew he couldn't keep. "My name is Robert Frostfang," he said, "and you, Queen of Nothing, have just walked into the Lunar realm, a pocket dimension created by the first Luna Blancas as sanctuary and training ground for those who would carry their power forward. As for what I am," he paused, and something flickered in those amber eyes. "I'm your teacher, your ally, and perhaps, if the moon goddess is merciful, your salvation." "I don't need salvation," I snapped, anger flooding through me hot and sharp. "I need power. I need to learn how to kill the witch who murdered my parents. You need, he interrupted gently, to learn that power without control is just another way to die. Your Luna Blanca abilities are raw, untrained, dependent on a staff you don't even have anymore. You couldn't defeat Malachar if you went back today. She'd turn you to stone just like your parents, and this time there'd be no one left to remember your name." The words hit like physical blows because they were true. "Then teach me," I said through clenched teeth. "If you know so much, if you've been waiting for me, teach me what I need to know." Robert Frostfang uncrossed his arms and took a step closer. Orion growled low but didn't attack, which was strange. My wolf dog didn't trust anyone easily. "I've been imprisoned in this realm for 257 years, Robert said quietly. "Bound by prophecy that said, only when an alpha with a pure heart crosses the threshold will the chosen of the moon be freed. You're that alpha, Morwenna. You opened the gate that hasn't opened since I was locked in here. You're the one the prophecy spoke of." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Pure heart? Have you not been paying attention? My heart is full of rage and vengeance and hate. I want to watch Malachar suffer. I want to make her feel every bit of pain she caused. That's not pure. That's poison." "Purity isn't the absence of rage," Robert said. "It's the refusal to let rage consume you entirely. You're angry, yes. You want revenge, yes. But you also stopped to help a wounded fox when you were 12. You gave your breakfast to a starving child when you were 16. You've never once used your power to hurt someone weaker than you. That's purity of heart, choosing compassion, even when the world gives you every reason to choose cruelty." "You've been watching me," I said slowly. "How?" Scrying magic. I've been watching the mortal world for decades, waiting for the one who could free me. I saw what Malachar did. I saw your parents fall. I saw you run. I saw everything. His voice softened. I'm sorry for your loss. They died protecting you. That means something. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. What do you want from me? Robert Frostfang met my gaze steadily. I want to make you a deal. Stay here for 1 year. I'll teach you to master your Luna Blanca powers without the staff. You'll become stronger than your mother. Stronger than any Luna who came before you. I'll give you everything you need to go back and take your throne from Malachar. In exchange, he paused. In exchange, I ask only this. If, at the end of that year, you feel genuine love for me, I'll be freed to join you in the mortal world. If not, I remain here, but you leave with power enough to reconquer everything. I stared at him. You want me to fall in love with you as payment? I want you to give love a chance, he corrected. The prophecy is specific. I can only be freed by being claimed by an alpha whose pure-hearted love is genuine and freely given. I can't force it. I can't manipulate it. If you don't love me by the end of the year, the prophecy keeps me here, and you go free regardless. There's no penalty for not loving me, Morwenna. The training is yours no matter what. Why? I demanded. If you're so powerful, why haven't you escaped on your own? Because prophecy binds absolutely, Robert said simply. 257 years ago, I used forbidden magic to try and prevent a catastrophe I'd seen in visions. The moon goddess punished my presumption by binding me here until I learned humility, until I learned that some things can't be controlled or forced, only chosen freely. Love is the ultimate free choice. I can't leave until someone chooses to love me knowing exactly what I am and what I've done. What did you do? I asked. I tried to cheat fate, he said. I tried to save someone I loved by rewriting destiny itself. It didn't work. She died anyway, and I've been paying the price ever since. We stood there in that impossible place under 3 moons, and I considered his offer. 1 year of training in exchange for the possibility of love. No guarantee I'd feel anything. No punishment if I didn't. Just 1 year of my life spent learning to become powerful enough to take back everything that had been stolen from me. I thought about my parents' dust scattered on the wind, about Malachar sitting on my throne wearing my crown, about the rage that burned in my chest like a second heart, pumping fury through my veins instead of blood. 1 year was nothing. 1 year was everything. If I agree, I said slowly, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what would happen? Where would I stay? What would the training look like? Robert gestured to the floating islands around us. This realm exists outside normal time. 1 year here equals 1 day in the mortal world. You won't lose any time in your hunt for revenge. As for living arrangements, there's a palace. He pointed to the largest floating island in the distance, where a structure of living crystal gleamed, with separate chambers. I won't touch you unless you ask me to. I won't pressure you for affection. I'll simply be here, teaching you, talking with you, giving you a chance to know me as I get to know you. At the end of the year, you decide. Love or no love, freedom or continued imprisonment. It's entirely your choice. And if I walk back through that gate right now, then you go back to winter and war and Malachar, still weak, still untrained, still unable to defeat her. You'll die within a month. I've seen that future too. Orion pressed against my leg, and I looked down at him. His glowing eyes were calm, approving. He trusted this stranger, which was more than I could say for myself. But trust wasn't what I needed right now. I needed power. I needed training. I needed to become strong enough to tear Malachar apart with my bare hands if necessary. If falling in love was the price, well, I'd spent 28 years not falling in love with anyone. 1 more year wouldn't hurt. Fine, I said. 1 year. You teach me everything. Make me strong enough to kill a blood witch. And at the end, we'll see. Robert Frostfang smiled, and this time there was real warmth in it mixed with unmistakable sadness. Then welcome, Queen of Nothing, to the place where you'll become a queen of everything. Orion howled once, long and approving, the sound echoing across impossible distances. And I realized, standing there under 3 moons with a stranger who'd waited 257 years for me to walk through a gate I hadn't known existed, that I'd just agreed to something that would change me forever. I just didn't know yet whether that change would save me or destroy me. Robert said he would teach me to master my power, but what he actually taught me was something far more dangerous, that I'd spent 28 years being half of what I could be, and the other half had been buried so deep I'd forgotten it was screaming to get out. The Palace of Living Crystal became my prison and sanctuary both. Robert led me there that first day, across bridges of solidified light that hummed under my feet, past floating waterfalls that cascaded into nothing, through gardens where silver trees grew fruit that tasted like starlight captured in skin. The palace itself was breathtaking. Walls of crystal that shifted colors with the eternal twilight, floors so polished they reflected the 3 moons above, chambers that seemed to reshape themselves to match the occupant's mood. He showed me to my quarters, a suite of rooms on the eastern wing, as far from his chambers as the palace allowed. The message was clear: separate spaces, separate lives, connected only by training, and the year stretching between us like an impossible bridge I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. "We begin tomorrow at dawn," Robert said, standing in my doorway, "or what passes for dawn here. The full moon will be at its zenith. That's when your power will be strongest, when we can establish the foundation." "Foundation of what?" I asked, exhaustion making me sharp. "Of everything you should have been taught years ago." He paused, amber eyes studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Your mother trained you to channel power through the lunar staff. That's like teaching someone to walk using crutches when their legs are perfectly functional. The staff is a tool, Morwenna, a focus. But Luna Blanca magic comes from within, from the moonlight that lives in your blood, your bones, your very soul. Tomorrow, we strip away the crutches and teach you to run." He left before I could respond, and I was alone for the first time in 3 weeks. Alone without the constant fear of Malachar finding me, without the cold and hunger and desperate searching. Just alone in a crystal palace under 3 moons with a year of training ahead of me, and a man who wanted me to fall in love with him as the price of his freedom. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt terrified. The first month was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. Robert woke me before the full moon reached its peak, leading me to a training courtyard where the crystal floor was inscribed with old tongue symbols that glowed faintly in the twilight. Orion watched from the sidelines, those luminous eyes tracking every movement. "Show me your power," Robert commanded. "Without the staff, just you and your Luna Blanca magic. Show me what you can do." I tried. Moon goddess, I tried. I reached for the power the way my mother had taught me, visualizing the staff in my hands, imagining channeling moonlight through silver wood. Nothing happened. I tried again, harder, forcing it, demanding it. Still nothing. "Stop," Robert said after my 5th failed attempt. "You're doing it wrong." "I'm doing it exactly how my mother taught me." "Your mother taught you to be dependent. She taught you to need the staff because that's all she knew. But the first Luna Blancas didn't have staffs, Morwenna. They had themselves. The power is already inside you. You just have to stop looking for it outside." He moved behind me, and I felt his hands hover near my shoulders without touching. "Close your eyes. Stop thinking about staffs and channeling and all the things you were taught. Instead, feel. Feel the 3 moons above us. Feel how their light touches your skin. Now feel deeper. Feel how that same light exists inside you, like a second heart made of silver fire." I wanted to argue that this was nonsense, mystical garbage that wouldn't actually work, but I was desperate enough to try anything. I closed my eyes, stopped thinking, started feeling, and there it was. Like Robert said, a second heart in my chest, pulsing with light that had nothing to do with the moons above and everything to do with what I was. Luna Blanca, daughter of moonlight, born with power that didn't need silver wood to exist. "Now," Robert's voice was soft, close to my ear. "Let it out." I opened my palms, and the power exploded outward, raw, uncontrolled, a blast of silver light that sent Robert stumbling backward and made Orion yelp in surprise. It lasted maybe 3 seconds before I lost control, and it snapped back into my chest like a rubber band, leaving me gasping. "There," Robert said, and he was smiling, actually smiling, wide and genuine. "That's what you really are. Now we just have to teach you control." Control came slowly. I failed more than I succeeded that first month, collapsing from exhaustion so many times Robert finally conjured cushions around the training courtyard so I'd have something soft to land on. He was patient but demanding, never softening his criticism when I did something wrong, never letting me quit when I wanted to give up. "Again," he'd say, every single time I failed. "You're stronger than this." Again. I hated him for it. Hated how he pushed me past what I thought were my limits. Hated how he was right every time. I was stronger than I thought. I could do more than I believed. The power inside me was vast and deep and terrifying in its potential. At night I'd collapse into my crystal chambers, every muscle screaming, and Orion would curl up beside me, warm and solid. Sometimes I'd catch him staring toward the western wing where Robert's chambers were, and I swear the wolf dog was communicating with the mage somehow, in ways I couldn't hear or understand. The second month brought breakthrough. I was in the training courtyard, practicing the basic energy manipulation Robert had been drilling into me, when something clicked. The power that had been fighting me suddenly surrendered, flowing through my hands smooth as water, and I conjured moonfire for the first time. Not regular fire, moonfire. Silver flames that didn't burn but purified, dancing across my palms like living things. They were cold and hot simultaneously, beautiful and terrible, and holding them felt like holding pieces of the 3 moons themselves. Moon goddess, I breathed. Yes, Robert said quietly. He'd been sitting on the courtyard wall watching, and now he stood, moving closer. That's Luna Blanca fire. It can't be created by any other magic. It purifies corruption, burns away dark magic, heals wounds that shouldn't heal. Your mother could do this, but only with the staff. You've done it with nothing but yourself. Pride flooded through me, warm and unfamiliar. When was the last time I'd felt proud of myself? When was the last time I'd accomplished something that felt real and earned, rather than inherited? That night, after training, Robert invited me to dinner on one of the smaller floating islands, a garden platform where fruit trees grew, and a table had been conjured from solidified moonlight. We sat across from each other, eating food that tasted like nothing I'd ever experienced, and he told me stories. Stories about his life 257 years ago, when he'd been royal mage in service to the Luna Blanca line, about the queen he'd loved, Celestine, her name was, who died fighting a demon incursion at the eastern border, about how grief had driven him to do the forbidden thing, to write a prophecy using magic that should never be touched. I thought I could force fate, he said, staring at his hands. I thought if I bound myself to wait for another Luna Blanca, someone who could change everything, I could somehow make Celestine's death mean something. Instead, I just locked myself in a beautiful cage and waited for 2.5 centuries while the world moved on without me. Why tell me this? I asked. Because you should know what you're dealing with, he said. I'm not some noble hero, Morwenna. I'm a man who couldn't let go of grief, who tried to cheat death and destiny both. I chose this prison, and now I'm asking you to be the key, which isn't fair to you at all. I looked at him across that table of moonlight and saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine regret, genuine loneliness. This man had been alone for longer than I'd been alive, in a realm of impossible beauty with no one to share it with, waiting for a prophecy he'd written himself to come true. I'm sorry about Celestine, I said quietly. He looked up, surprise in those amber eyes. Thank you. And I'm sorry about your parents. We sat in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence, comfortable, like 2 people who understood loss recognizing it in each other. The 3rd month introduced combat training. Robert created magical projections, enemies made of light and shadow that moved and fought like real opponents, bandits, dark mages, demons, and Malachar. The first time I faced the projection of the Blood Witch who'd killed my parents, I froze. She looked exactly as I remembered, tall, gaunt, with eyes like black holes and that obsidian staff raised to strike. My Luna Blanca power sputtered and died, terror choking it off at the source. Fight! Robert's voice cut through my panic. She's not real, Morwenna. It's just light and memory. Fight! But I couldn't. The projection Malachar smiled with those black hole eyes and raised her staff, and I was 14 again, hiding behind a tapestry, watching my mother crack in half. I fell to my knees, arms wrapped around myself, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. The projection vanished. Robert was there instantly, kneeling in front of me, his hands on my shoulders, solid and real and present. Breathe, he commanded. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. 4, 5, 6. Breathe out. I followed his count until the panic subsided, until I could think again through the terror. I can't fight her, I whispered. I see her and I'm back there. I'm useless. You're traumatized, Robert said gently, which is normal after what you survived. But trauma doesn't make you weak, Morwenna. It just means we need to approach this differently. We'll work up to her. Smaller enemies first. Build your confidence. By the end of this year, you'll be able to face 100 versions of Malachar without flinching. He was right. He was always right, I was learning. We fought bandits for days, then dark mages, then demons, each progressively harder, until finally I faced the Malachar projection again, and this time, I didn't freeze. This time I fought, and I won. After that particularly intense session, sweat-soaked and trembling from adrenaline, I looked at Robert, really looked at him for the first time. Saw how his dark hair stuck to his forehead, how his muscles moved under his fitted leather, how his amber eyes watched me with an intensity that had nothing to do with teaching, and everything to do with something else entirely. Attraction hit me like a physical blow, sudden and unwelcome and undeniable. I turned away quickly, making excuses about needing rest, and fled to my chambers. I would not be part of this prophecy. I would not let physical attraction become something more. I'd promised him nothing except the possibility of love, and possibility didn't mean certainty. The 4th month settled into a rhythm. Training during the moon peak hours, meals together afterward, long conversations that stretched late into the eternal twilight. Robert told me about the world before the plagues and wars, about what France had been like in his time. I told him about my childhood, about learning magic from my mother, about the pressure of knowing I'd inherit a throne and a kingdom's worth of responsibility. Orion stayed close during these talks, lying between us like a guardian and witness both. Sometimes I'd catch him and Robert exchanging glances, and I knew they were communicating somehow, in ways that didn't require words. "He likes you," I told Robert one night. "He's been waiting for me as long as I've been waiting for you," Robert said. "Orion isn't just your guardian. He's a gift from the moon goddess herself, part wolf, part celestial being, all devoted to protecting the Luna Blanca line. He knew you'd need to find this place. He knew I was here. He's smarter than I gave him credit for," I muttered. Robert laughed, and the sound made something warm bloom in my chest. When was the last time I'd made someone laugh? When was the last time I'd heard genuine joy from anyone? The 5th month brought crisis. I woke screaming from a nightmare. The same nightmare I'd had every night for months. My mother's stone eyes cracking. The sound of her shattering. My father's dust settling on the throne room floor. Malachar's laugh echoing through empty corridors. I woke to find Robert in my chambers, Orion pressed against my side, both of them there because I'd been screaming loud enough to wake them across the palace. "Sorry," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize for trauma," Robert said firmly. He sat on the edge of my bed, careful not to touch me without permission. "Do you want to talk about it?" I did talk. For the first time since it happened, I told someone the complete story. Every detail, every sound, every smell, every moment of that night, when I lost everything. And Robert listened, didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it, just listened with those amber eyes focused entirely on me like I was the only person in any world that mattered. When I finished, he asked, "May I hold you?" The question surprised me. He'd never asked to touch me before, always maintaining careful distance. But I nodded, and he gathered me into his arms, and I cried against his chest until I had no tears left. He was warm, solid, real, and being held by him felt safe in a way I hadn't felt safe since before that terrible night. That terrified me more than anything else. I pulled away after a few minutes, putting distance between us, my heart pounding. "Thank you. I'm fine now. You can go." He studied my face for a long moment. "You're not fine, but you will be. And I'll be here when you need me, whether that's tonight or next month or never. Your choice, Morwenna. Always your choice." He left, and I spent the rest of the night awake, trying to understand why feeling safe with him scared me more than facing magical projections of my greatest enemy. The 6th month marked a turning point. I mastered lunar shields, barriers of solidified moonlight that could stop anything from arrows to dark magic to physical blows. Robert tested them by throwing increasingly powerful attacks, and none of them broke through. "You're officially more powerful than your mother ever was," he announced, and I heard pride in his voice. "Seraphine was brilliant, but she never moved past staff dependency. You've transcended that. You're becoming what Luna Blancas were always meant to be." We celebrated modestly that night, just the two of us and Orion on that garden platform, eating fruit that glowed faintly silver and drinking wine that tasted like captured starlight. I laughed for the first time since entering the gate, actually laughed at something Robert said, And when I looked up, I caught him watching me with an expression that made my breath catch, hope mixed with melancholy, like he was seeing something precious he knew he'd never get to keep. The 7th month brought doubt. I'd been in the lunar realm for half a year, growing stronger every day, safe and powerful in this impossible place. Meanwhile, one day was passing in the mortal world. One single day while Malachar ruled my kingdom and my people suffered. Should I leave early? Should I go back now before the full year was complete? But then I'd remember facing that Malachar projection, how I'd frozen the first time, how even now, after months of training, the sight of her made my hands shake. If I went back now, would I win? Or would I just die and accomplish nothing? Robert found me on the palace balcony one evening, staring at the 3 moons above. "You're thinking about leaving," he said. "Not a question. I'm thinking I'm a coward," I admitted. "Hiding here while my people suffer." "You're not hiding. You're preparing. There's a difference." He leaned against the balcony rail beside me. "Fear of failure isn't cowardice, Morwenna. It's intelligence. It means you understand what's at stake. You've never been a coward. You've been a survivor. And survivors know when to fight and when to grow stronger first." His words helped, but they didn't completely erase the guilt gnawing at my chest. The 8th month, Robert showed me something I hadn't asked to see. Using scrying magic, he projected images of my kingdom, showing me what had happened in the months since I'd fled. Executions in the town square, food shortages, people living in fear of Malachar's blood magic. But he also showed me something else. People whispering my name. The White Queen, they called me. The lost Luna. Some still believed I'd return. Some still had hope. Seeing that renewed something in me. Purpose. Determination. I would go back. I would end this. But I'd do it right. When I was strong enough that failure wasn't an option. For the first time, I imagined returning with Robert at my side. 2 mages instead of 1. Luna Blanca, and whatever ancient power he possessed combined. The thought shouldn't have excited me as much as it did. The 9th month, everything changed. We'd been training in close combat, magical fighting that required physical proximity, dodging and blocking and counterattacking in ways that had us practically dancing around each other. Sweat-soaked, breathing hard, faces inches apart. Robert caught my wrist mid-strike, pulled me close to demonstrate a blocking technique, and suddenly we were frozen there. His hand on my wrist, my other palm pressed against his chest, faces so close I could count his eyelashes. The air between us crackled with more than magic. "Morwenna," he breathed, and the way he said my name made heat pool low in my stomach. I could see the exact moment he was going to kiss me, saw his amber eyes drop to my lips, saw him start to lean in. I jerked backward like I'd been burned. "I can't do this," I said, voice shaking. "I can't give you what you need just because we're attracted to each other. You deserve more than that." "Attraction isn't love," Robert said, voice rough with want he wasn't bothering to hide. "But love often starts with attraction. I'm not asking you to force feelings, Morwenna. I'm asking you to stop denying them if they exist." "They don't," I lied, and we both knew it was a lie. I fled to my chambers and spent the night awake, body aching with want, mind spinning with confusion. Did I feel something for him beyond respect and gratitude? Could this be the beginning of love? Or was I just lonely and touch-starved and grateful to the first person who'd been kind to me since losing everything? I didn't know, and not knowing felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark, unable to see how far the drop was. The 10th month, Robert taught me scrying. I learned to peer into other realms, to see possible futures, to read the threads of fate even if I couldn't change them. In one vision, I saw myself defeating Malachar, sitting on my reclaimed throne, ruling with power and intelligence. But I was alone, cold, hardened by victory into something that no longer remembered how to feel joy. In another vision, Robert stood beside that throne, and my kingdom prospered under our combined rule. But I couldn't tell if it was real or just wishful thinking, prophecy or fantasy. "I wrote the prophecy," Robert admitted during that lesson. "But I can't see how it ends. Free will is always stronger than fate. You'll choose what you choose, and the universe will bend around that choice. I can't force the outcome. No one can." The 11th month arrived with crushing weight. Only weeks remained until the year ended. I was at the peak of my power, could feel Luna Blanca magic flowing through me as naturally as breathing. I didn't need more training. I was ready. But ready for what? To leave? To fight Malachar? To say goodbye to Robert forever? Orion started acting strange, more alert, pacing the palace like he sensed something approaching. I avoided Robert for days, trying to sort through the tangle of feelings in my chest. I liked him, respected him, admired him, felt attraction so strong it kept me awake at night. But did I love him? The prophecy required genuine, pure-hearted love, freely given. Nothing less would break his binding, and I genuinely didn't know if what I felt qualified. The final month arrived too fast. The 12th moon cycle of the year, the last days stretching out like a countdown to something inevitable. On the final day, I found Robert in the central courtyard, standing under the perfectly aligned 3 moons, waiting. "I'm ready to leave," I told him. His face didn't change, but something died in his eyes. "Then it's time." He asked the question we'd both been dreading. "Do you love me, Morwenna?" I could have lied, could have said yes and freed him, could have claimed feelings I wasn't certain I possessed, but I'd promised him honesty, and I kept my promises. "I don't know," I said, and watched him flinch like I'd struck him. "I feel something. Respect, gratitude, attraction, maybe the beginnings of love, but I'm not certain, and I won't lie to the moon goddess or to you. You deserve better than false words spoken just to free you." Robert smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. "Then our prophecy ends here. You got what you came for. I stay where I've always been." We stood there in that courtyard, while the 3 moons sang overhead, and I touched his face with shaking hands. He caught my hand, pressed it against his cheek, and closed his eyes like memorizing the sensation. "If I could stay," I started. "You can't," he interrupted gently. "Your people need you. This was always your journey, not mine. Go be the queen you were born to be. End Malachar. Save your kingdom. And if you ever think of me," he opened his eyes, "think kindly." The goodbye tore something in my chest I hadn't known could tear. Orion whined softly, pressing against both of us, and I realized he was saying goodbye too. Robert led us to the gate, still standing where we'd first entered, now glowing with the same liquid moonlight as a year ago. He pressed something into my hand, a crystal, small and warm, that pulsed with captured moonfire. "If you ever need me," he said, "this will let you contact me. Just so you know you're not alone." I clutched the crystal so hard it should have shattered. Then I kissed his cheek, quick and desperate, and stepped through the gate before I could change my mind. Orion followed. The liquid light wrapped around us, cold and familiar, pulling us back toward the mortal world, toward winter and war and everything I'd left behind. When we emerged in the frozen clearing, I turned back just in time to see the silver gate close with a finality that made my heart physically hurt. The light died. The gateway became just silver metal again, no longer active, no longer accessible. Orion threw back his head and howled, a sound of loss and determination woven together. I stood there in the northern woods, radiating with power I'd earned, ready to take back everything that had been stolen from me. But my chest felt hollow in a way that had nothing to do with Malachar or thrones or crowns. It felt hollow because I'd just walked away from something I was only now realizing I should have kept. I discovered that revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's a dish that needs to boil until every ingredient dissolves into pure essence, and only then do you serve it, while it still burns in the enemy's mouth. The clearing in the northern woods looked exactly as I'd left it a year ago, or rather a day ago, since time in the mortal realm had barely moved while I'd spent 12 months in the lunar realm. Snow still covered the ground in those strange, deliberate patterns. The ancient trees still stood sentinel around the ruined temple. The silver gate still gleamed, though now it was dark and dormant, no liquid moonlight filling its frame. But I was different. Fundamentally, completely, irrevocably different. I looked down at myself and realized my stolen peasant clothes had transformed. The threadbare wool and rough linen had been replaced by something that shouldn't exist. Garments woven from solidified moonlight, silver fabric that flowed like water, but held like steel, shifting and shimmering with every movement. My hair, which had been matted and filthy when I'd entered the gate, now fell clean and long down my back, threaded through with strands that glowed faintly silver in the winter light. I was wearing my power like armor. I was the weapon now. Orion stood beside me, and he too had changed. He'd always been large, but now he was massive, easily the size of a full-grown horse, his white fur gleaming with an inner luminescence, his eyes blazing with power that made them look like captured moons. When he breathed, silver mist curled from his jaws. "Ready?" I asked him, and my voice came out different too, stronger, clearer. The voice of someone who'd spent a year learning exactly who she was and what she could do. He huffed agreement, and we started walking south, toward the castle, toward Malachar, toward everything that had been stolen from me. I didn't hide this time, didn't skulk through forests or steal from farms or disguise myself as a peasant. I walked straight down the main road in broad daylight, and the few travelers we passed took one look at me, glowing with lunar power, accompanied by a wolf dog the size of a warhorse, and scrambled off the road, crossing themselves and whispering prayers. "The White Queen returns," I heard them whisper. "The Luna Blanca lives." Good. Let them whisper. Let the word spread. Let Malachar hear that I'm coming. The journey that had taken me 3 weeks of desperate fleeing took less than a day of purposeful walking. By sunset, I could see the castle rising against the darkening sky, torches lit in the towers, smoke rising from chimneys. Home. My home, occupied by the witch who'd murdered my parents and claimed my throne. Not for much longer. Guards at the outer gate saw me approaching and drew their weapons. Crossbows, swords, the standard armaments of men who'd never faced real magic. They shouted challenges that I didn't bother answering. Instead, I kept walking, and when the first crossbow bolt flew toward my chest, my lunar shield activated automatically, deflecting the bolt harmlessly into the snow. More bolts, more blades. None of them touched me. The shields I'd spent months perfecting with Robert simply curved around me like invisible walls, turning aside every attack without me having to think about it. "I am Morwenna Starfrost," I announced, my voice carrying with unnatural clarity. "Luna Blanca of the North. I'm reclaiming what's mine. Stand aside or be moved aside. Choose quickly." Half the guards fled. The other half attacked. I didn't hurt them. Didn't need to. Orion growled once, a sound that made the earth vibrate, and the rest of them scattered like leaves in a storm. We walked through the gates unopposed. The castle courtyard was exactly as I remembered. Cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of feet, the well in the center, the stables to the east. But it felt wrong now. Corrupted. I could sense Malachar's blood magic soaked into the very stones, a darkness that made my Luna Blanca powers recoil instinctively. I'd fix that. Later. First, I had a witch to kill. The throne room doors were closed. I didn't bother knocking. I placed both palms flat against the heavy oak and pushed with my power. The doors exploded inward with a sound like thunder, moonfire racing along the wood grain, and I walked through the burning doorframe like I was stepping through a beaded curtain. The throne room fell silent. It was full. Nobles and courtiers and servants, all of them dressed in finery they probably couldn't afford, all of them frozen in place staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to terror to desperate hope. And sitting on my throne, wearing my mother's crown, draped in robes of black and crimson, Malachar the Bloodstone. She looked exactly as I remembered, tall and gaunt, with skin like old parchment and eyes like bottomless pits. Her obsidian staff rested against the throne, and when she saw me, those black hole eyes widened slightly. Not fear, surprise. "The Luna puppy returns," she said, and her voice was like poisoned honey dripping over broken glass. "Without your staff, without your parents, without allies or army, what exactly do you think you're going to accomplish, little girl?" I walked forward slowly, deliberately, my moonlight-woven gown flowing behind me, power radiating from my skin in waves that made the torches flicker. Orion paced at my side, lips pulled back from fangs that glowed with their own inner light. "I don't need a staff," I said quietly. "I don't need parents. I don't need allies. I need only this." I raised both hands and conjured moonfire, silver flames dancing across my palms, cold and hot simultaneously, beautiful and terrible. The nobles gasped. Malachar's confident smile faltered. "You learned a few tricks," she said, but I heard the uncertainty creeping into her voice. "It won't be enough. I've had months to solidify my power here. This throne is mine now. This kingdom is mine. You're nothing but a ghost of what failed. Then let's see which of us is more substantial," I replied. "You and me, right here. Winner takes the throne. Loser takes the grave. Unless you're afraid to face me without your blood magic tricks." That did it. Malachar's face twisted with rage, and she stood, grabbing her obsidian staff. "I'll show you tricks, child. I'll turn you to stone just like your pathetic parents. And this time I'll keep you in one piece. Put you in the garden as a statue to warn others what happens when they challenge me." The nobles scattered to the walls. Smart. What was about to happen wasn't something you wanted to be caught between. Malachar struck first, a bolt of corrupted energy that screamed through the air, black-red and smoking with malice. I blocked it with a lunar shield, the dark magic splattering against my barrier like oil against glass. The impact sent tremors through the floor, but I didn't move. My turn, I said. I unleashed moonfire. Not a bolt, a wave. Silver flames washed across the throne room floor toward Malachar like a tsunami of purifying light. She conjured her own barrier, blood-red and pulsing with stolen life force, and the moonfire crashed against it with a sound like breaking crystal. For a moment we stood there, power against power, light against darkness, each of us pouring everything we had into the attack and defense. The air between us crackled and sparked, reality itself straining under the weight of so much magic in one place. Then I pushed harder, drew deeper, used every technique Robert had drilled into me for 12 months. The moonfire intensified, burning brighter, hotter, purer, and Malachar's barrier began to crack. "How?" she gasped. "You're just a Luna. We're supposed to be weak without our staffs." "You thought we were weak because we let you think that," I said. "The staff is a tool. The power is us. And you made the mistake of giving me time to remember that." Her barrier shattered. The moonfire consumed it, racing toward her, and she screamed, actually screamed, throwing up a desperate shield at the last second. The flames stopped inches from her face, but I could see the terror in those black hole eyes. She teleported across the room, appearing near where my lunar staff stood propped against the wall. She'd kept it as a trophy, the arrogant fool. She grabbed it, tried to channel power through it, tried to turn my family's sacred artifact against me. The staff rejected her. Silver light exploded from the wood, and the staff flew from her hands like it had been yanked by invisible strings, soaring across the throne room to slap into my waiting palm. The moment my fingers closed around it, power surged, not because I needed the staff anymore, but because it recognized its rightful owner. "The staff responds to bloodline, not power," I said coldly. "Did you really think you could use it against me? Did you really think any of this through?" Malachar snarled and started conjuring, calling forth the kind of magic that should never be used. Blood magic, death magic, forbidden arts that required sacrifice and suffering to fuel. Demons made of congealed blood and shadow began pulling themselves up from the floor, screaming with borrowed voices. I'd fought demons in training. Robert had made sure of that. I switched from moonfire to purification magic, the kind that burns away corruption at its root. The demons dissolved before they could fully form, their screams cutting off mid-shriek as silver light ate through them like acid through paper. Malachar tried the petrification curse, the same spell she'd used on my parents. I felt it coming, the dark magic reaching for me, trying to turn my blood to stone, my muscles to granite, my bones to cold rock. I reflected it, just turned my lunar shield into a mirror and sent the curse right back at her. She barely dodged, the petrification spell missing her by inches and turning a decorative column behind her into solid stone that cracked and shattered under its own sudden weight. We fought for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Magic against magic, spell against counterspell, attack and defense in a deadly dance that tore apart the throne room. Tapestries burned, windows shattered. The very stones of the castle groaned under the strain, and slowly, inevitably, I won. Because Malachar was powerful, yes. Ruthless, yes. Skilled in dark arts that would make most mages sick to contemplate. But I'd spent a year fighting a magical projection of her, learning her patterns, studying her weaknesses, training against an opponent who knew every move she'd make before she made it. I knew how to beat her. I'd beaten her 100 times already in training. This was just the final exam. The killing blow came when she overextended, trying for one last desperate attack. She poured everything she had into a curse meant to tear my soul from my body, and while she was focused on that, I hit her with a summoning spell Robert had taught me in month 8. Not summoning a creature, summoning memory. Every person Malachar had killed, every life she'd taken to fuel her blood magic, every innocent she'd sacrificed. I forced her to see them all, made her experience every death from the victim's perspective, made her feel what they felt, know what they knew, suffer what they suffered. She fell to her knees, screaming, her mind breaking under the weight of all that death and suffering. When she finally looked up at me, tears of actual blood streaming down her face, I saw something I never expected to see in those black hole eyes. Fear. Real, genuine, mortal fear. "Please," she whispered. "Mercy. I'll leave. I'll never return. You gave no mercy to my mother when you shattered her to dust," I said quietly. "You gave no mercy to my father when you ground him into powder. You gave no mercy to my people while you ruled them through terror. Why would you deserve what you refused to give?" I raised my hands one final time. Not moonfire, not shields. Just pure, undiluted lunar light, the kind that exists at the core of what Luna Blancas are, the essence of moonlight that has no purpose except to illuminate truth and burn away lies. Malachar tried to scream, but no sound came out. The light touched her, and she began to dissolve, not turning to dust like my parents, but fading into shadow that the light consumed. Her body, her magic, her very existence unraveling like cloth pulled apart thread by thread. In seconds, there was nothing left. No body, no ash, no evidence she'd ever existed except the corrupted magic slowly fading from the castle stones and the memories of those who'd suffered under her rule. Silence filled the throne room. Every noble, every courtier, every servant stared at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Awe, fear, hope, relief, everything mixed together. I walked to the throne, my throne, sat down slowly, feeling the carved wood against my back, the armrests under my hands. The lunar staff stood beside me, glowing softly with approval. The nobles who'd served Malachar looked terrified, probably expecting execution or banishment, or some creative magical punishment. "Those who served her from fear may stay," I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Those who served her from greed have 1 hour to leave my kingdom. After that, you face trial for treason." Half the room fled immediately. Good. I didn't want opportunists in my court anyway. I reached up and removed the crown Malachar had been wearing. My mother's crown, tarnished and corrupted by months of contact with blood magic. I dropped it to the floor, and instead conjured a new crown from solidified moonlight, silver white, delicate but unbreakable, glowing with the power I'd earned through 12 months of brutal training. I placed it on my own head. "I am Morwenna Starfrost," I said. "Luna Blanca, Queen of the North. This throne was never hers. It was always mine. And I'm reclaiming everything she stole." The remaining nobles knelt. The servants bowed. Orion howled once, long and triumphant, and the sound echoed through the castle like a proclamation. I'd won. I'd reclaimed my throne, defeated my enemy, avenged my parents. Everything I'd set out to do when I fled into those frozen woods 3 weeks ago. So why did victory feel so hollow? The days that followed blurred together. I threw myself into ruling, restoring order, feeding my people, undoing the damage Malachar had done in the months she'd controlled my kingdom. Robert hadn't just taught me combat magic. He'd taught me strategy, governance, leadership, how to read people, how to delegate, how to make hard decisions that needed making. I was a good queen, maybe even a great one. My people looked at me with hope again instead of fear. The castle slowly shed Malachar's corruption, returning to something that felt like home. But at night, alone in my chambers, the same rooms I'd grown up in, now feeling foreign and too large, I'd stand on the balcony and look up at the sky. 3 moons hung there, not the impossible 3 moons of the lunar realm, but the normal single moon with 2 others I could only see because I was Luna Blanca, because my power let me perceive what others couldn't. And looking at them reminded me of that other place, that realm of eternal twilight where time moved differently, and magic flowed like water, and a man with amber eyes had taught me everything I'd needed to become this. The ache in my chest wasn't the same as losing my parents. That had been sharp and devastating, a wound that might scar but would eventually heal. This was different. This was a constant, dull pain, like missing a limb I hadn't known I had until it was gone. Orion noticed. He stayed close, watching me with those luminous eyes, and I could tell he knew something was wrong. I'd accomplished everything. I'd won. Why wasn't I happy? 1 month after reclaiming the throne, I was on the balcony again, unable to sleep, staring at the moons like they might hold answers I couldn't find anywhere else. Robert was right, I whispered to the night. Love can't be commanded, but it also can't be denied when it finally comes. And that's when I understood. The absence of Robert hurt worse than losing my crown ever had. The loneliness wasn't just about being physically alone. It was about missing the one person who'd seen me at my weakest. and still believed I could be strong, who'd trained me without coddling me, who'd waited 257 years for someone like me, and asked for nothing except the possibility of love. I didn't just like him, didn't just respect or admire or feel attracted to him. I loved him. The realization hit like falling off a cliff, sudden and inevitable and too late. I loved Robert Frostfang, and I'd walked away from him because I'd been too scared and too uncertain to recognize what I was feeling until it was gone. How do I go back? I asked the empty night. The gate closed. The prophecy ended. I can't. I heard the balcony door open behind me. Orion padded out, and in his mouth he carried the lunar staff. He walked to me and dropped it at my feet, then sat back on his haunches, eyes blazing with that inner light. The staff began to glow. Not the normal silver glow of Luna Blanca magic, but something else. Patterns I recognized from the gate, symbols that whispered of doorways between worlds. Orion barked once, sharp and commanding, and then I heard it. His voice, not transmitted through body language or animal sounds, but actual words forming in my mind, clear as spoken language. "Morwenna," Orion said, and I nearly fell off the balcony in shock. "You love him now. Your longing and sorrow are reflections of pure and true love. Point the staff at the full moon and the gate will open." I stared at my wolf dog, who I'd known for 14 years and who'd apparently been capable of speech this entire time. "You can talk," I said stupidly. "I'm a celestial guardian sent by the moon goddess," he replied, somehow managing to sound amused even telepathically. "Of course I can talk. I just wasn't allowed to until you were ready. Now pick up the staff and open the gate. Robert has waited long enough, and so have you." My hands were shaking as I bent and lifted the lunar staff. It was warm under my palms, thrumming with power, eager to help. I pointed it at the full moon hanging in the winter sky, and I spoke the words that appeared in my mind, like they'd always been there, just waiting for me to need them. "Moon goddess, hear me. I am Morwenna Starfrost, Luna Blanca, and I call upon the ancient roads between realms. Open the way. Let me claim what I should have claimed before. Let me bring home what belongs with me." The staff blazed with light so bright it turned night into day. A beam of pure silver moonlight shot from the tip, touching the moon itself, and where that beam connected, reality tore. The gate opened. Not in the northern woods where I'd first found it. Here, on my balcony. A doorway of liquid moonlight forming in midair, showing through to that realm of eternal twilight where a man with amber eyes had been waiting alone for 257 years, where he was about to wait alone no longer. I'd always believed that love was a weakness queens couldn't afford, until I discovered that love was the only thing strong enough to break prophecies that even gods couldn't undo. The night air was cold against my face as I stood on the balcony, the lunar staff blazing in my hands like a beacon calling across impossible distances. The full moon hung heavy and bright in the winter sky, and I could feel the other two moons, the ones only Luna Blancas could perceive, responding to my call, singing in harmony with the power flowing through me. Orion sat at my side, his massive form radiating that celestial light, his telepathic voice still strange in my mind, even though I was beginning to accept that my wolf dog companion of 14 years was something far more than I'd ever imagined. "Speak the words," Orion said gently. "Not a spell, not an incantation, just truth. The moon goddess doesn't respond to formulas. She responds to honesty." My hands were shaking, not from cold, not from fear, from the overwhelming weight of what I was about to do, what I was about to admit not just to the universe, but to myself. I lifted the lunar staff higher, pointing it directly at the full moon, and I spoke. Not the words Orion had suggested, but the ones pouring from my heart like water from a broken dam. "I love Robert Frostfang," I said, my voice carrying across the silent night. "Not because of gratitude for training me, not because I owe him a debt I'm trying to repay. I love him because he taught me that strength and vulnerability aren't opposites. They're partners. Because he waited 257 years and would have respected me if I'd said no. Because when I look toward the future, I can only see it clearly when he's in it. Because the ache of missing him hurts worse than losing my crown ever did. Because I was only half alive until I met him, and I didn't even know what I was missing until it was gone." The staff blazed brighter, light pouring from it in waves that made the castle stones glow silver. "Moon goddess," I continued, tears streaming down my face now. "I was afraid of this, afraid that needing someone made me weak, afraid that loving him meant losing myself, but I was wrong. Being with Robert didn't diminish me, it completed me, and I'm done being afraid of the best thing that ever happened to me. The light exploded outward, a column of pure silver moonlight shooting from the staff to the moon itself, and where that beam connected, reality tore open like fabric. The portal materialized in mid-air above my balcony, that same vertical pool of liquid moonlight I'd walked through twice before, shimmering and alive and impossibly beautiful. But this time, it wasn't empty. This time, I could see through to the other side, to that realm of eternal twilight with its 3 moons and floating islands and crystal palaces. And standing on the other side, hand reaching toward the portal, amber eyes locked on mine with an intensity that stole my breath. Robert. He was dressed differently than I'd last seen him. Not the fitted leather and ancient velvet of his usual clothing, but something simpler. A traveling tunic in deep midnight blue, boots meant for walking long distances, a cloak that looked like he'd conjured it moments ago, in preparation for a journey he hadn't been sure he'd get to take. He'd been ready, hoping, waiting for this exact moment, even though he couldn't have known if it would ever come. Our eyes met across the barrier between worlds, and I saw everything in his face, relief and joy, and love so profound, it made my chest ache with the beauty of it. Morwenna, he breathed, and even across dimensions I heard my name in his voice like a prayer. Come home, I said. Please, come home to me. He stepped forward, and the moment his boots touched the liquid moonlight of the portal, everything changed. The light pulsed once, twice, 3 times in rhythm with my heartbeat, and then Robert was stepping through, emerging onto my balcony in the mortal realm, breathing air that hadn't touched his lungs in 257 years. The portal didn't close behind him. Instead, it transformed, no longer a temporary gateway, but a permanent arch of solidified moonlight, a doorway standing open between the lunar realm and the mortal world, connecting them forever. Robert stumbled as he completed the crossing, falling to his knees on the stone balcony, hands pressed flat against the ground like he needed to confirm it was real. His shoulders shook, and I realized with shock that he was crying. This powerful mage who'd waited centuries in isolation, finally free, finally here, finally breathing the same air I breathed. It worked, he whispered, voice broken with emotion. The prophecy actually worked. You came back for me. His voice cracked. You love me. I dropped the lunar staff and fell to my knees in front of him, reaching for his face with shaking hands. He looked up, and the expression in those amber eyes, pure, unguarded joy mixed with disbelief so profound it hurt to witness, nearly undid me completely. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize, I said. I'm sorry I walked away. I'm sorry I was too afraid and too stupid to recognize what I was feeling until he kissed me. Cut off my apology by pulling me against him and claiming my mouth with a desperation that matched my own. His lips were warm and urgent, and tasted like starlight and promises. And when I kissed him back, when I opened to him and let him in, power exploded from both of us in waves. Lunar light erupted around us like a supernova, silver and white and brilliant beyond description, washing across the balcony, the castle, spreading out in ripples that made every window in the kingdom glow. I felt something click into place deep in my chest, not painful, but profound, a connection forming, a bond snapping into existence with the force of destiny recognizing itself, the mate bond, real and unbreakable and exactly right. I gasped against Robert's mouth as I felt his emotions flood through that new connection. Love so deep it felt like drowning, relief that made my knees weak, joy that sparkled like champagne in my veins, and beneath it all, a bone-deep certainty that this was right, that we were meant for this, that everything that had happened, the tragedy, the training, the separation, had been leading to this exact moment. Mate, Robert whispered against my lips, the word sacred and claiming. My mate. Mine. Finally mine. Yours, I agreed, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. And you're mine. No more waiting. No more prophecies. No more uncertainty. Just us. Together. Finally. Behind us, Orion made a sound. Not quite a bark, not quite a howl, something else entirely. We pulled apart and turned to look at him, and what we saw made us both freeze in wonder. The massive wolf dog was glowing, his white fur blazing with inner light so bright it was hard to look at directly. As we watched, his form began to shift, not shrinking but expanding, becoming larger, more majestic, more clearly other than any normal animal. His features refined themselves, becoming sharper, more ethereal, until he looked less like a wolf and more like a living constellation given canine form. When he spoke, his telepathic voice was different, deeper, resonant with power that made the air vibrate. Morwenna Starfrost, Robert Frostfang. I am Orion, celestial guardian of the moon goddess, sent to guide the Luna Blanca bloodline through its darkest hour and into its brightest dawn. I stared at the being who'd been my companion since I was 14 years old. You're not really a wolf dog, are you? I'm a fragment of divine will given form, Orion said gently. A guardian sent to protect you, guide you, and witness the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. The prophecy was never Robert's prison, Morwenna. It was a test. He needed to learn patience, humility, and faith in something beyond his control. You needed to learn that strength and love aren't enemies. They're allies. You both passed. Robert's hand found mine, squeezing tight. And now my purpose is complete, Orion said, and there was peace in his voice. You two are bound as mates, as rulers, as partners in destiny. The gate between realms stands open permanently, a bridge between mortal and magical. The Luna Blanca line is secured and strengthened. I am no longer needed. No, I said, panic rising in my chest. You can't leave. You've been with me since I was a child. Your family, please. Orion patted forward, that enormous celestial form somehow gentle as he pressed his glowing head against my chest. I felt warmth flood through me, not physically, but spiritually. A blessing, a gift, a final act of protection from a guardian who'd loved me in whatever way divine beings could love. I was never truly here, he said softly. I've always been a reflection of the moon goddess's protection, a temporary guardian, until you were strong enough to stand alone. But you don't need me anymore, Morwenna. You have Robert. You have your power. You have your kingdom and your future. And most importantly, you have yourself, the complete version, not the half-alive girl you were before. Tears streamed down my face as Orion moved to Robert, pressing his head against the mage's chest in the same blessing. Protect her, Orion said. Not because she's weak. She's anything but. Protect her because love means standing together against the darkness. Can you do that? With everything I am, Robert promised, voice thick with emotion. Orion stepped back, looking at both of us with those luminous eyes that had guided me through so much. Then my work is done. But I leave you with a gift, the ability to summon lunar guardians when you truly need them. Wolves made of moonlight, my echoes, will answer your call in times of greatest need. You'll never be without protection. He began to dissolve, his solid form becoming translucent, breaking apart into motes of silver light that drifted upward toward the moon like reverse falling stars. I reached for him, desperate to hold on, but my hands passed through light that felt like warm silk and gentle promises. Thank you, I whispered, for everything, for protecting me, for guiding me, for bringing me here. Orion's voice came one last time, fading like an echo. You brought yourself here, Morwenna. I just showed you the path. Now walk it well. The last of him dissolved, streaming upward to rejoin the moon he'd come from, and Robert and I stood alone on the balcony under the light of 3 moons, the mortal moon, and 2 others that were now visible even to normal eyes, a permanent change to the night sky that marked what had happened here. We stood in silence for a long moment, processing the loss and the gift both. Then Robert turned to me, cupped my face in both hands, and looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I wrote the prophecy 257 years ago, because I saw you in a vision, he said quietly, a queen of white fire who would change the world. I imprisoned myself because I knew, in whatever way fate lets us know things, that only you could free me. Not through the mechanics of the prophecy, but because only you would make 2.5 centuries of waiting feel like time well spent. Robert, let me finish, he interrupted gently. I fell in love with the idea of you centuries before you were born, with the vision of a strong, stubborn, brilliant woman who would rather face death than give up. And then I met the reality of you, and you were so much better than any vision. You were real and flawed and perfect, and mine. I married myself to the prophecy of you before I knew your name. Now I'm asking you to marry me by choice. He knelt again, formally this time, and I watched in wonder as he conjured something from pure moonlight, a ring made of solidified lunar essence, delicate but unbreakable, glowing with inner light that pulsed in perfect synchronization with my heartbeat. Morwenna Starfrost, he said, voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Luna Blanca, Queen of the North, my mate, my destiny, my choice above all choices. Will you marry me? Not because prophecy demands it, but because you want to, because we choose each other. Will you be my wife? I looked down at this man who'd waited longer than I'd been alive for someone to love him freely, who'd trained me without asking for anything in return, who'd let me walk away, even though it broke him, because my choice mattered more than his freedom. Robert Frostfang, I said, pulling him to his feet because I refused to have him kneeling for this. You waited 257 years. I'm not making you wait one more second. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and it sized itself perfectly, warm and alive against my skin. Then he kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, full of promise and possession, and pure joy. The mate bond sang between us, and I felt his love flowing through it like a river finding the sea. We were married that same night, under the full moon, with the permanent portal glowing behind us like a blessing. The court assembled in record time, nobles still half-dressed from being woken, servants carrying hastily prepared flowers, everyone staring at the mage who'd appeared from another dimension to claim their queen. The ceremony combined traditional royal wedding vows with the Omegaverse mating ritual, because we were both and needed to honor both. A priestess of the moon goddess performed the rites, and when it came time for the marking, the physical claiming that would complete the mate bond, Robert bared my neck with reverent hands and bit down gently but firmly, claiming me as his in the way that couldn't be undone or questioned. The sensation was electric, not painful, but intense. Pleasure and power and possession all mixed together. I felt the mate bond complete itself fully, locking into place with a finality that felt like coming home after years of wandering lost. Then it was my turn. Robert bared his neck for me, and I marked him in return, feeling his blood on my tongue for just a moment before the wound sealed itself, leaving only a silver scar that glowed faintly with lunar magic. Mine, the mate bond whispered in my mind. Mine as I am yours, forever. Some of the older nobles looked scandalized. Robert wasn't of royal blood, wasn't from this century, wasn't anything they'd expected their queen to choose, but I stood before them wearing my crown of solidified moonlight, with my mate at my side, and spoke with a voice that carried absolute authority. Robert Frostfang is my mate, I announced. Chosen by me, blessed by the moon goddess herself, bound to me by magic that predates your grandparents' grandparents. He is my husband, my king consort, my partner in ruling this kingdom. And anyone who challenges this challenges not just me, but the divine will that brought us together. Does anyone wish to challenge? Silence. Complete and total silence. Good, I said. Then let's celebrate. We've had enough darkness. Tonight we have light. The court erupted in cheers, some genuine, some forced, but all loud. Musicians were summoned. Wine was poured. Food appeared from the kitchens in amounts that seemed impossible given how little notice they'd had. The castle came alive with celebration in a way it hadn't since before my parents died. Robert and I danced in the great hall, and everyone could see the mate bond shining between us like a visible thread of light. Proof that this wasn't political or convenient, but destiny made manifest. When he held me close and whispered promises in my ear that made me blush, when I laughed at something he said, and saw his eyes light up with joy, everyone saw that their queen was happy, and for the first time in my entire reign, being happy felt like it was allowed. 6 months later, everything had changed. The kingdom of northern France flourished under our joint rule. Robert brought knowledge from his era, agricultural techniques that had been lost to time, defensive magic stronger than anything modern mages knew, healing practices that saved lives the current physicians couldn't. I brought the strength I'd earned, and the compassion I'd always had, tempered now by the wisdom Robert helped me develop. The people loved us, called us the White Queen and the Mage King, told stories about how the moon goddess herself had sent Robert to save me, how our love had changed the very sky to show 3 moons instead of 1. The portal remained open on my balcony, our balcony now, since Robert had moved into my chambers the night we married. We'd created a small garden around it, silver-leafed plants from the lunar realm growing in magical soil, and sometimes we went through, just to spend an afternoon in that realm of eternal twilight, to remember where we'd found each other. We'd even started training young women who showed Luna Blanca potential, teaching them in the lunar realm where time moved differently, where they could spend weeks mastering powers that had taken me months. Building something better, something stronger, ensuring the Luna Blanca line would never be dependent on staffs or artifacts again. But the best change, the one that made everything else meaningful, was growing in my belly. I was 6 months pregnant with twins, both showing signs of Luna Blanca power even in the womb, making my skin glow faintly silver whenever they were active. Robert was obsessed, hands on my belly constantly, talking to the babies in a mixture of modern French and ancient languages they couldn't possibly understand, but that made them kick happily anyway. He was protective but not smothering, worried but not controlling. The perfect balance of care and respect that made me fall more in love with him every day. On a warm spring evening, we stood together on the balcony where everything had changed. My back against his chest, his hands cradling the swell of my pregnant belly, 3 moons shining overhead in perfect alignment, something that had never happened before our mate bond, but now occurred regularly, as if the universe itself celebrated what we'd become. "Do you think the moon goddess planned all of this from the beginning?" I asked, leaning back into Robert's warmth. "The attack, the training, the separation, all of it?" "I think she gave us pieces," Robert said thoughtfully, his breath warm against my ear. "The prophecy, the powers, the circumstances, but we chose how to arrange them. We chose each other. Free will is always stronger than destiny, remember?" I turned in his arms to look up at him. This man who'd waited centuries and would wait centuries more if I asked him to. I lost my parents, lost my kingdom, lost my certainty about who I was and what I was supposed to be. "And what did you find?" he asked, amber eyes soft with love. I smiled, feeling tears of happiness gathering. "I found that queens can be both strong and vulnerable, that love doesn't weaken power, it multiplies it, that destiny and choice aren't enemies, but partners, that losing everything sometimes means finding what you were always meant to have." I pressed my hand over his where it rested on my belly, feeling our children kick against our joined palms. "And I found you, found us, found a future I never knew I wanted until it was standing in front of me asking me to be brave enough to claim it." Robert kissed me then, slow and sweet and full of promise, and the mate bond hummed with contentment between us. Behind us, the portal to the lunar realm glowed softly, a reminder of where we'd been. Around us, the kingdom we ruled together thrived. Ahead of us, children and years and countless tomorrows stretched out full of possibility. I'd been a queen who lost everything. I'd become a queen who chose everything. And that choice, to love, to trust, to be vulnerable enough to let someone in, had made all the difference. Sometimes, prophecy isn't about what must happen. It's about who you need to become for the impossible to become inevitable. I'd become a woman who was strong enough to admit she needed someone, brave enough to love despite the risk, wise enough to know that power shared is power doubled, and standing there under 3 moons with my mate's arms around me, and our future literally growing inside me, I knew with absolute certainty that every moment of pain, every second of doubt, every tear shed in darkness had been worth it to reach this moment of perfect light. The White Queen and the Mage King, the prophecy said. The Luna who changed everything. They were right. I did change everything. I just changed myself first.